Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everyone. This is Erkeda, and I have a very special guest today, Jamel Hill, who is a future doctor coming up very soon. When is your graduation?
It was Saturday, actually.
Oh, so you are a whole doctor. My bad. This is Dr. Jamel Hill.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself.
For sure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. This is beyond a pleasure. So as you mentioned, my name is Jamel Hill, born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. I went to IU Bloomington, had too much of a good time in undergrad. I pledged. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and going into my senior year of high school, okay, all right, my sister's a Delta, okay. And going into my senior year of undergrad, I knew that I wanted to continue to try to pursue medicine, but I didn't have all of my ducks lined up. And so at the completion of undergrad, I moved to Miami, Florida, completed a master's degree in biomedical sciences. I was there for about 2 years, came back to Indianapolis, applied to med school, did not get it. Well, I actually applied to med school while I was in grad school, did not get in. Came back to Indy, worked for a year, reapplied and got in. Had a crazy time in medical school, and actually took like 3 or 4 months out of school to take some personal time, and graduated in 5 years. I am headed to University of Kentucky for a PM&R residency. I have aspirations of possibly pursuing a fellowship in interventional spine, sports medicine, but we will see what's going on there. Personal life-wise, I am married, baby on the way in August, so it is going to be it is going to be a crazy summer. We move June 21st. I start work the July 1st, and the baby comes the end of July. So a lot going on in the Hill house, but we are truly blessed. And so just looking forward to this baby girl. Some of my interests, as mentioned, is sports medicine. I do, at the IU School of Medicine, I do a lot of advocacy for healthcare disparities. And I'm also a bit of a history buff. I have a research article that I got published and presented at a conference, and hosted a history day at the school for. The project was on Black physicians in the early Indianapolis, in the late 1890s, early 1900s, and just really talked about how these physicians had just such a huge impact on the Black community in Indianapolis, and how the university hasn't done a great job of really highlighting these figures, and just how that also has contributed to extremely low numbers of African American, especially male physicians in our country today. So I know that was a long introduction, but try to squeeze it all in there.
That was great. There was so much to celebrate, and it seems like you'll have a busy summer ahead with the new baby and the big move and the transition from medical school to residency. So we'll definitely hit on some of the key points that you talked about, but I'd like for us to back it up a little bit, because I love hearing about some of the things that people overcome in their journey to medicine, because a lot of us listeners out there, and as I'm sure we were when we were going through the process, kind of live our lives by kind of a checklist. And if things don't go according to plan, we think it's the end of the world, and obviously it's not. So can you kind of tell your listeners, our listeners, kind of what kind of obstacles you came up with when you didn't get accepted that first time, and what did you do to improve your application to move forward?
Got you. They are definitely you guys as listeners. I do not have any fans or anything like that. And so that is an excellent question. And so my whole thought process from undergraduate, honestly, until I actually had to take some time away from medical school, was how fast can I get through this, right? And so the goal was always a single destination of graduation getting done, as opposed to really enjoying the journey and absorbing the information that I needed to, and not just in a clinical sense, but also in a life sense. How can I really enjoy the moment? Because I was always so focused on what was beyond what I was in right now. And so again, I took the Mcat 3 times, The first time, there was no reason that I should have taken that MCAT. I hadn't even finished my prereqs, but my thinking was, how soon can I get in and how soon could I graduate? So took the MCAT, did terrible, was in grad school, took the MCAT again, did a little bit better. And so I thought it was good enough to go ahead and apply. So I applied and I sent my application in August, didn't get an interview until late January. It was literally the coldest day that year. And when I got the email like in March that I didn't get in, I was like really frustrated at that point. But one thing that in this frustration, I'm very happy that I kind of put the work in a little bit early. I've always felt like if you put me into a room, I can mix really well. I really enjoy talking to people. And so one of the admissions people who was like directing our admissions day, big shout out to her. Her name was Dr. Karen Smart. And like I said, I'm from Indianapolis. And so I just happened to ask her, I was like, hey, your last name is Smart. Do you spell it with 2 T's? Because I went to high school with a girl whose last name is Smart. Mm-hmm. She was like, yeah, she was like, yeah, that's actually my niece.
Wow.
My husband is her brother. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's crazy. And then we just kind of got to talking. And then she was like, well, here's my contact. If you need help or anything like that, just let me know. And she was like, I can also put you in contact with my husband if you need a mentor. I was like, I definitely do. So this was before I found out I didn't get in. Let me hurry up. So when I found out I didn't get in, I reached out to her and then also another lady in the admissions office, and they gave it to me straight. And I really, really appreciate them for just being honest with me. They told me that my application wasn't where it needed to be. I needed to improve my MCAT and I needed to finish my grad program, but just continue to apply. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to both Karen Smart and her husband, Dr. Smart. And literally the first day that I met Dr. Smart, he was like, what do you think is stopping you from getting into medical school? I was like, my MCAT. Like, I think if I can just get a higher score, because at this point, my extracurriculars are there. I'm in a grad program. I think it's really my MCAT holding me back. And he was like, all right, well, I'm going to pay for you to go to Kaplan course.
Wow.
And the first day I met this man, he gave me $2,000 to go to a Kaplan course. I almost cried in front of him. And I was like, this is like, is there a camera in here? Like, am I on punk?
You thought you were on punk.
Man, it was just crazy. And so took the MCAT again, did pretty decent, or I guess well enough to get in. Also made sure that this cycle I applied as soon as I could. I think it opened the first week of June. I applied that week, got an interview in August, and found out by maybe it was November 2015 that I found out that I was going to start 2016. And so I guess the lesson from that was, one, network as much as you can and really just try to make every experience that you can a worthy experience and a learning experience. And then from there, reach out for help. You know what I mean? Like, there's no point of having a network if you're not going to reach out and really connect with that network. And so, I mean, it literally changed my life. And so that's kind of what happened and how I got into school.
That is an amazing story. And I'm glad that we took it back to kind of go into those details, because a lot of times people are like, oh yeah, I went and I studied some more if I didn't get in, and boom, there it was. But you pointed out that, yes, you did do that, but there were so many other factors there, that networking that you did and just reaching out and connecting as a human being and talking about things, where you met Mrs. Smart, and then you were connected with her husband, Dr. Smart, who was so compassionate and kind on his first meeting to offer you that. Like, mentorship is very important, and you never know what types of opportunities and blessings and things you will get just by talking and being kind and open and honest. So you were able to take that time that you had in between not getting accepted and reflect on how you can improve your application. And you did that. And you took that assessment and you were like, okay, I need to do better on my MCAT. And when he asked you, instead of being prideful, you were honest with him. And you said, well, it's my MCAT. And he said, let's fix that. So it's always a good idea to actually utilize your mentors. If someone offers their number or their support, we're not saying that everyone is going to do that, but you never know who could. Yeah.
No, it definitely was just an amazing experience. And like, it really kind of shaped how I was always one who felt like as I lifted, I needed to climb people, especially people that look like me. And that was an example for me where, again, we talked, prior to this recording, how like just the number of Black physicians is so low. And it's like, you need a hand up sometimes. You need, you need to be able to find faces that look like you to help out. And so, literally since then, anything that I can do for anyone behind me or anyone, I guess, even in front of me, it's like, how can we help each other? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So that was, again, just a great, a great example for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the numbers are really low in medicine. So for Black physicians in America, they make up only 5% of all doctors in America. So that means that 95% of doctors do not identify as Black. Yeah. And of that, males only make up about 2% of that number. And that number has actually gone down from 1978, where it was over 3%. So the number is going in the wrong direction. So we definitely have to figure out ways to mentor and uplift and figure out things so that people can thrive in these environments and go back and help decrease the health disparities and treat the patients in the certain populations. And we're not saying that people who do not identify as Black cannot help, but we have to work together to try to become culturally competent and work on those things. Speaking of that, there was a cultural adjustment when you matriculated through medical school. And recently you were featured in an NPR article called "Being Mentored Helps Black Medical Students Face Isolation, Racial Microaggressions." Can you tell me about some of the cultural experiences you had in medical school?
Yeah, so I would say that my experience it's unique to me, but probably not unique on a broad spectrum. And so the school that I went to, and it's listed in the article, and we are the largest medical school in the nation. And so we are one school and we have 9 different campuses. And I was at the main campus here in Indianapolis. And I mean, for our class size, even at the Indianapolis campus, it's 150 people plus maybe 160 some years. And so you walk into these large lecture halls and we speak of that 2%. And it's like, it's already, at least a visual barrier to one, have the onus on you to say, hey, I'm gonna have to be the one to reach out and really have to network. And sometimes it wasn't always a welcoming field, to be completely honest. Like it honestly felt like at times, when we would have these group projects or these group settings, it's like, conversations were already had before I came, or, and so, or things that I just wasn't included on. And so it really put me in a situation where I already felt isolated. And then you put that on top of some of the struggles that I had in terms of just passing some of the exams in medical school. It already creates this environment that not only am I one of the few people who look like me, I'm also one of the few students who I feel like are struggling. And so it was just like a really, really rough time my second and third year, trying to just get out of my own headspace about like being a minority in medicine, and then also like struggling. And so it definitely took me some personal time to really just kind of work through that. And I want to ask again, what was the second part of the question? What
was your biggest surprise culturally? But I think you kind of covered it, whereas we are all entering medical school. And when you enter, you're very smart, obviously, because you all were accepted. And we're in this playing field where there are going to be some academic challenges, whether or not you have academic challenges with test taking, or just the immense amount of medical information that you have to learn. And if you do well there, some people might struggle in the clinical setting. So everyone is not coming in at 100%, because if you were there and you came on the first day ready to be a doctor, there would be no purpose of you being there. So there's always opportunities for growth. But when you come in as a minority, and I definitely can identify this, and I'm sure every other Black physician that we can ask in the nation will probably have a similar story, unless they went to one of our historically Black institutions, which there are a few.
And I guess to simplify my answer, the first 2 years of school, probably the biggest culture shock was just sort of this sense of isolation that I felt. And then the second part of medical school, those years 3 and 4, where, you just have some sort of clinical responsibilities, was just sort of the microaggressions that I got from patients. I can say that I can't think of any overt or any instances where I felt a microaggression from an attending, but definitely from patients. And it was listed, I mentioned this in the NPR article, like there are definitely at least two times where patients have, spoken to my attending or spoke to one of the residents and said, "Hey, I don't want the Black doctor."
Mm-hmm.
Just like this is just ridiculous, man. Like it's ridiculous.
Yes, and it's a lesson that a lot of people have to learn, and it brings on, and I may be putting some emotions into your own feelings, but like a sense of embarrassment or shame when someone says they don't want to see you because you're Black. This has happened to me several times, both in medical school and as an attending, or having to explain and go to your team and say, "Oh, they don't want to see me because I'm Black," and see how they respond to that. If they're like, "Okay, don't go see them," or if they're going to support you and have that environment like, "Okay, we're going to have a talk with this patient because we all need to get this education and we're all treating our patients similarly and doing evidence-based medicine, and racism is not okay." So it's just an extra amount of stress placed on top of the stress that all students are experiencing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that may just be a little different experience to add to what your classmates may have experienced.
Yeah. Yeah.
At Med School Coach, we know that getting into medical school is hard. In fact, 60% of pre-meds who apply to medical school don't even get accepted. And if you want to get accepted into a top medical school, it's even harder. It's a complicated process, and even students with great grades and Mcat scores get left out. That's why more students than ever are turning to Med School Coach for admissions advising. Our advisors are all physicians and former admissions committee members, so they know exactly what medical schools are looking for. One-on-one admissions advising from Med School Coach makes all the difference. Our expert team will help you develop a game plan, prepare your application, edit your essays, and coach you for interviews. Every pre-med has a story, and we'll help you tell it so you can stand out from the crowd. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach admissions advising package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
Going back to our earlier statement about Black men making up about 2% of the doctors in America, we also mentioned that that number has also declined over the past 40 years, going from about 3.2% to about 2.3%. Why do you think that is?
That's an excellent question. It is just super loaded. I actually talked about this in the historical project that I mentioned earlier in this interview. And so the title of the project was Disappearing Heroes, a look into Indianapolis physicians in the late 1890s, early 1900s, and how systemic racism affects, the number of physicians that we have today. And so I would say, one, in our current times, it is extremely difficult. I guess it's always been extremely difficult to matriculate from undergrad onto medical school and then becoming a physician. And so along that way, you need pipeline programs to get students that are in middle school, that are in high school, that are in undergraduate, to see others that look like them in order for this representation to really matter and kind of help propel them through those rough times. Because like you mentioned, we're all going to have those times where we have a microaggression or we have just regular student difficulties with, the curriculum. And so I think the biggest thing for me is wanting to add more support, whether that be financial or whether that is a physical presence for students who are interested in STEM. And I think that's one of the big issues. And I sort of addressed that in my presentation. I also think probably the other major thing is just the financial barriers that keep a lot of students out. Because, being on the inside, I know that like I can get student loans to stay in school. But it was the times really before I got into medical school, or even when I was in graduate school, I really struggled to finance this dream. Like if I didn't have the love and support and financial support from my family, or the mentorship, like I'm not getting into a Kaplan class to improve my Mcat score, or I'm not able to move to Miami to go to a graduate school or pay for my education. And so, or even like whatever other courses I've had to take to, prepare to get this degree. And so it's a huge financial barrier. And then also I would probably say there's just such a delayed sense of gratification in medicine that people are probably able to get through other avenues. And so like, if you wanted to go into nursing, you can start working a lot sooner and become an NP sooner than you can be a physician. And same with PA school. And so there's also just a lot more options for people out there. So yeah.
I like those reasons because, of course, it's multifactorial and there are a lot of reasons that may not even be assessed. And on top of that, Black people aren't a monolith. So different people may have different needs. They may need financial support. They may need mentorship. They may need the visibility. So it's about figuring out all of those ways to make Black doctors more visible. There are a lot of times where I'm in certain groups or things like that where you'll see other physicians say, a child came into their visit this day and they're 18 and they say, oh my gosh, you're my first Black doctor. That's very strange to happen in America, but so common. And then we've already talked about how important mentorship is, not only with what your wonderful mentor did, but just letting people know about the field and the process and kind of what they're getting into, because not everyone has physicians in their family, especially if the percentage of Black doctors is so low. Financial assistance and scholarships are important for everyone, but sometimes certain demographics may need it. And just kind of knowing what's out there, because if you aren't, like you said, exposed to physicians, you may choose a different route, like becoming a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. And there's nothing wrong with those roles, but just letting people know that there are other options out there and what the actual track and pathway is and how to succeed in that.
Yeah. Exposure is so key. And that's why for me, such appreciative of my experience. So in undergrad, I was able to go to a pipeline program it used to be called SMDEP, which is a summer medical dental education program. It has since changed names. I think it's like SHPEP or something. I'm not quite sure what the new acronym is, but I got a chance to go to University of Louisville for 6 weeks and just be exposed to all different kinds of healthcare providers and really kind of enrich my experience. And again, just something that really kind of propelled me through undergrad.
That's awesome. And I just want to kind of go back to one question as we talked about how interesting certain Black physicians' medical school journey may be as opposed to some others. How can non-Black classmates, professors, attendings, or we'll just call them allies, help to do the work to become more inclusive, even if they aren't minorities themselves? For example, we can't control if a patient does not want us to be seeing them, but our teammates can control how we respond to that and the type of support they give. So what other reasons or techniques do you think our allies could use?
This was actually like my favorite question on the list that you sent me, because I feel like when we talk about diversity, education, and inclusion, oftentimes it comes at such a huge Black tax. And, you know what I mean? Or minority tax, or however, people want to phrase it. Oftentimes when we go into these settings that include enrichment on how to be an anti-racist, it is at the expense of our time, you know what I mean? And so like we get into this cycle of, such unfortunate time last summer with all the murders and police brutality. And it's like, okay, well, the school wants to host a town hall meeting, or the school wants to host some sort of educational seminar. And it's like, well, let's look over at our Black physicians and ask them to put it together, right? And so again, it pulls you from maybe a career path that you aspire to, because there's just such a need in that field. And even though it may be a joy to do that, that may not be what you always wanted to do. And so I guess to answer the question is show up, raise your level of consciousness and learn how to, one, put in the work and help out in a sense of like putting on these programs or educating yourself. And then also in those crucial moments, be okay with having courageous conversations. And, I would be more than happy to have a conversation that may be considered awkward or taboo about race if I knew someone's intentions were right and they were wanting to learn. And so, have some courage and step out and actually ask how I can help. I think it's probably the best way that I would suggest allies out there to just kind of increase their own understanding. Because for me as a Black physician, I had no issue going to the LMSA, so the Latino Medical Student Association events, to learn more about their population or learn more about what their culture, you know what I mean? And so because I'm Black, that doesn't mean that I know about every minority. And so it is always a process of learning more. And so be willing to kind of put that work in. It's not easy, but I think that we owe it to our patients.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that it's not only about being culturally competent about one culture. We should be learning from one another. So we should be learning about Latin culture. We should be learning about Jewish culture. We should be learning about everything so that we can best serve our patients and support our colleagues.
Yeah, for sure.
At Med School Coach, we know that studying for the Mcat exam can be challenging, especially for busy students on the go. That's why our team created Mcat Prep, the only all-encompassing study app built specifically for the Mcat. Mcat Prep by Med School Coach provides student access to extremely high-quality content and a personalized curriculum for free. The app has more than 250 videos, 1,000 flashcards, and 1,000 unique Mcat questions. Plus, Mcat Prep by Med School Coach allows students to create a personalized study schedule and track progress over time. You need every competitive advantage you can get to get into medical school, and now you can put the experts from Med School Coach into your pocket. It's the closest pre-med students can come to a personal tutor without spending a penny. Download Mcat Prep by Med School Coach for free at medschoolcoach.com/MCAT. Or download it directly from the Apple Store or Google Play Store. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Mcat Prep by Med School Coach can help.
My final question for you, as you've given so many pearls of wisdom, is what piece of advice would you like to share to those who are just in the beginning stages of just about to enter medical school or currently enrolled?
Got you. So this was the first year since maybe elementary school that I won an award from school. Wow. And I know, right? Wow, geez. I got an award, and the award was like the school's top 50 graduates. And they asked me sort of a similar question, what I would advise students who are starting this path. And I think if you've gotten to the point where you're in medical school or you're thinking about medical school and you've already completed so much of what it takes to, make it this far, just know that you have everything that you need already inside of you, and just kind of trust in yourself to continue on, because it is going to be so many times where you're going to have to question yourself. People are going to question you. And so just really find peace in knowing that this is for me and that I can achieve this stuff, even if I need help or even if I need to reach out. You've got what you need already. Just learn how to use those resources. Because again, throughout the story, we talked about how I made it, but there's just no way that I get here on my own, whether that's a pipeline program, whether that's a mentor, whether that's taking some time away and getting help for myself. All of those things, I already had that stuff in me. Just learning how to use your resources.
Absolutely. Resources are important. Mentorship is important. It takes a village. So I appreciate you coming on the show. For those who may be listening, who may have questions, or other listeners who may want you to speak on their shows or things like that, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, before I say that, man, this was so awesome. I really appreciate this opportunity. But the social media plugs, you can follow me on Instagram at Dr.Hill, HILL1. And on my Instagram page, I have a link tree, and that can also direct you to my email, as well as my Twitter, and then some of the articles that were published about me from NPR, as well as like our local paper called the Indianapolis Recorder.
Thank you. I'm sure that our producers will put it in a link in our show notes. So definitely check out there and reach out to Dr. Hill. And we really appreciate you for coming out today. And for all of the listeners out there, be sure to click the subscribe button, and I'll be back next week with another guest. Bye.
Thank you so much. I definitely follow back, so please follow your boy. I'm trying to get these followers up.
Get those followers. All right, bye.
Yeah.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.